honest. So I want to start off by saying thank you to the worship band for covering for me. I don't even know if anybody here was aware of what happened, but I showed up at the wrong church. I've never done that before. And my parents still live in Ohio. My mom is a nurse who works third shift. So my parents don't have cell phones. The details go on and on, but I don't talk to my mom very often. Our schedules are hard to connect. So I was talking to her on the way, I had a few minutes, and I pulled into the church parking lot and I said, well, nobody's here. But okay, I must be speaking to a really small group, and that's fine. And she said, well, are you sure you have the right place? And I said, yeah, I'm positive. I've looked at my emails 100 times this week, and I even pulled it up. I said, let me just check again. So I pulled up. I'm like, yes, I'm at the right place. You probably know by now where I was, maybe. And so, I'm lounging around in my van, chatting with my mom, waiting for more people to show up. And after a while, they did. So I went in and said, I'm here to speak. You guys, of course it happened when I'm right here in my own hometown. So I didn't know how to reach Linda. So then in the midst of all this, I'm jetting over here. Luckily it wasn't far. And Cory, my husband, calls me and says, you're at the wrong place. I said, I know I am. I'm working on it. So nothing like just getting going from the start. So the worship band was singing extra to make time for me. And I have to say, that last song they sang is one of my favorite songs and one of the most meaningful songs. I was really grateful that I was able to catch the tail end of it. And if I had caught the beginning of it, it probably would have made me weepy. So I caught the perfect amount of it to start us off. So it is truly a pleasure to be here tonight. And Linda has been wonderful to work with. She gave me all the right information many times, and this is in no way a reflection on her. It is a reflection on the fact that my life is just a little too scattered sometimes for details. But I always love the opportunity to talk about my rescue from the life I always wanted. Is this too close to my mouth? Okay. I always love the chance to talk about this. This is like the beating of my heart. This is this is the story God has given to me and to my family, and I love having the chance to talk about it with other people. I especially love talking about it when it doesn't require me to get on an airplane first. So even though tonight was a little haphazard in its own way, it's really cool to be able to hop in my minivan and come over to spend time with my neighbors. So you'll probably hear me use the word neighbor a lot tonight, and you probably notice that I use that word a lot in my book because my neighbors have changed my life. They have changed my life. I always say, I do find when I speak with people, until I talk about my youngest son, some of you in here know him, and when I talk about his journey into our family, that has like the ability to just leave me in a puddle on the floor, so I'm just not going to talk about that tonight. The other thing that makes me emotional is my neighbors, and so even just saying the word already, like I feel it in my throat a little bit. So there might be tears tonight. I don't know. We'll see what happens. My family has been in Goshen now for 5 years. And that is a hard thing for me to comprehend. I still very much think of my life in a couple of different sections. And most recently, I think of my life before and my life after. And the after is now. And so we're in an interesting place where, it's been 5 years. 5 years is a while. We have lived in our house in Goshen longer than we have lived in any other house since we've been married. And we've been married for 18 years. We've moved around quite a bit. But this is the place we've been the longest. And for me, I'm always marking time by different things. I'm always like calculating. I'm not even good at math. So the calculations are probably faulty, but I'm always like keeping track of time and keeping track of, milestones and those kinds of things. So it was really, in August when we realized like we're at the 5-year mark. That's a big shift. And this book that many of you have read, have most of you spent some time, or you're familiar with the book. Okay. This came out a year ago. It was in publication for a year before that. So I wrote this 2.5 years ago. So it's just kind of funny to think through like how the timelines line up. And so we're going to talk a little bit. It's really great that many of you have read some of the book, because a lot of times I speak to groups that aren't necessarily as familiar with the book. And so I have to spend a lot of my time on backstory. And the backstory is really layered. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of things that we can talk about, but you guys really know a lot of my backstory. But we're going to touch a little bit tonight on a lot of what's in here, because it's still very much in here, and a lot of the things that have happened since this. But I started off by addressing you as my neighbors, and I wanted to touch on that just for another quick minute. I use the word neighbor pretty loosely now. And I think that's kind of the way God likes it. I think he had to kind of, as many of you probably know, he took me, kicking and screaming in a lot of ways. There was a lot of yanking me around in the process. But one of the things that I had to begin to understand is that my neighbors were not just the people that lived to the east and to the west of me. When my husband and I lived out on our farmhouse, that was my mentality of neighbors. I would read about love your neighbor as much as you love yourself, and I would think, well, okay, I guess I do. I don't hate them. I'm not mean to them. That must mean I love them. I don't know their names. We lived across fields from each other, but that was my paradigm for neighbor. And then we moved to a neighborhood, and everything changed. Like all of a sudden, I began to see that any person with whom my life intersects in some way is my neighbor. So I know probably not all of you live in Goshen, probably some of you do, but we're here tonight. We're here together in my community, in your community. I'm in your home right now, and we're neighbors, and I'm grateful for that. There are just a couple quick things that I need to settle up from the start. As I was planning my talk for tonight, there have been several other times that I've spoken to local groups, and it probably crosses my mind every time, I'm sure it does. But now, as time goes by, it crosses my mind even more. You might have been confused as to why my husband and I were so rattled about moving to Goshen. I'm just going to put that out there. You may have just thought, is this the same place that I'm thinking of in my mind? Is this the same thing? Like, what in the world, Shannon? Settle down. Settle down about Goshen. Why were you so nervous about moving to Goshen? Cory and I laugh about this all the time now. It makes me a little blushy. The truth of the matter is that anytime we're pushed a little bit out of our comfort zone, it has the power to derail us just a little bit. It feels a little reckless. Anytime we're doing something that's past our control, it can feel a little uncertain. And we are people who tend to run from uncertainty. I'm not speaking for everybody, because though we're neighbors, I don't know you well enough for these blanket statements. So I'll just speak for myself. For me, growing up as a country girl my whole life, living in these little tiny towns, surrounded by people who only looked and lived and believed the same way I did, it was a shift for us to think about going to a new city. I'm from Ohio. I'm not even, like, Indiana is new to me. The Goshen area is new to me. Living in a city, a small city, living in a neighborhood, all of that was new to me. And so I just want to thank you for being patient as you were reading and giving me some grace. I just talked to a brand new friend of mine last week at the Brew. That's where everybody meets. And she was just getting ready. She said, I just ordered your book. I mean, this is the second time we've ever met and spoken. She said, I just ordered your book. I'm getting ready to start reading. She was born and raised in Goshen, went to Goshen High School, went to Goshen College. And so all of these, I'm like, oh no, I need to prepare her. I need to give her some disclaimers. And so we talked that through. And she just laughed. She said, oh no, I totally get it. That's exactly how I think about South Bend. It's all relative. And I was really grateful for that because that's the truth. It's all relative. Change is scary. Being in a place where we are not the ones calling the shots and making the decisions is scary. But thank you for not finding me too ridiculous and for giving me the grace to continue reading. So you can take Goshen all the way out of the equation if you want to. My story, in a nutshell, this story, and the story I'm still living now, is about a journey away from my plans, my ideas, my preferences, my comfort, my security, my entitlements. In essence, it's a journey away from myself in every sense of the word. This can take place anywhere. So for most of us, it's not ever going to require us to move to a different city. For some of us, it might. And I'm always aware of the fact that for me, it might ask that of me again in the future. I hope not. We're so happy here. Lord, let us just be happy here for a long time. But for most of us, that's not going to be the biggest part of the story. It's not going to be about moving. It's not going to be about uprooting our family. In fact, for the past 4 years, we moved to Goshen 5 years ago. For the first year, everything was just new. Everything was different and new. And I remember so many details, and in part because I was writing so many of them down. I was writing everything down because that's what writers do. We think through our fingers and just keeping track of everything happening, keeping track of all the change. And there was some excitement there. With change, you take that, you jump the cliff, and it's scary, but then you land. And wherever you land, now you just have now you're in kind of the exciting part of okay, so now we're the new people, we're the new neighbors, our kids are new at school, we're new in the community. I mean, I knew very few people in Goshen. My husband knew just a few more. But we were in every sense of the word. We were just new. We were trying to get our bearings. It was interesting. It was exciting. It was different. But that only lasts so long. No matter what you're doing, the newness is going to wear off. And so, it happens gradually. I think last year, maybe even a little bit the year before, was when I had that reality check of, okay, wait, I can't keep saying I'm new to this neighborhood. I can't keep saying we're new to Goshen. We're not new anymore. In fact, the neighborhood I live in has a really high transience rate. So a lot of people are moving in and out. We have a ton of rentals in our neighborhood. So people are coming and going all the time. So at this point, I'm probably like the old neighbor, Shannan and Cory. They've been here forever. That's probably how some people see us. We found ourselves in a place where we were beginning to grow more comfortable in some ways, and that was honestly very scary for us. Because in this journey of understanding that comfort was never the goal, in so many different ways, we were kind of nudged away from comfort. But what's going to happen now? This is going to become the new normal, and that's exactly what happened. Still, I find myself constantly running from myself. I constantly find myself struggling to run from myself. I find myself constantly faced with the awareness that, I made these changes, I did these things. My family, we changed the way we live in so many different ways, but at my core, I still find myself wanting plenty of me. I find myself feeling like maybe I've done enough some days. I find myself thinking that, I've learned so much. Maybe I'm a little wiser now. Maybe I can start to make some plans for myself. These are my default modes, and they just don't seem to go away. And it's frustrating because I feel like I should know a little bit by now. And I do know. I know new things. I know new stuff. I know better. I have seen from close range that God's plan for me is so much better when I am not the one trying to be in control. But I know that the urge for more of me is probably never going to leave. Life keeps showing up as tension and as mess. And so that's something that's a pattern in my life now, as exhibited by my late arrival today, perhaps. Today was a rough day in my house and in my heart. There's a lot going on. Progress doesn't mean that I've transformed into a selfless person. I'm still pretty selfish, and I know it. But what I am beginning to understand is that this tension that I'm always feeling keeps me closer to God. And to just be completely honest, that's just where I'm at right now. That's where I'm at in my writing. That's where I'm at in my head. That's where I'm at in my heart. I'm constantly wrestling with this tension, and I'm wishing it would go away, and I'm wishing for things to be easier, and I'm wishing for the days when I didn't overthink everything. But I know that it's keeping me close to Christ. And that's a really beautiful thing. And I just don't know that there's another way. I don't know that there's another way to get there. I look back to my life, say 13 years ago. 13 years ago, we had moved back from DC, and I snapped my fingers and I said, okay, I'm ready to be a mom. I'm ready. So let's just start our family. I'm going to get pregnant, and we're going to do this because that's what everybody else around us is doing, and it's not hard at all. Well, that's not the way that it happened for me. And so I look at adoption. I look at Calvin, our first little guy that came into our family. And what I see now is that he was kind of he and then Ruby and then Silas and then Robert, they were like a door opening for us and saying, you do not know. You do not know the plans that I have for you. You don't know how hard it's going to be. You don't know how much worth there is in the tension. You don't know how much you're going to learn through the struggle. You don't know how, 13 years from now, you're still going to be dealing with some of the fallout of adoption. It's real. Some of you know this. But what happened after the adoption thing was, I look back, everybody's got different stories. For me, the story of adoption was like, we want a family. This isn't working. I guess let's adopt. It was very low emotion for Cory and I. We were just excited. We just wanted to see our family. We wanted to be parents. I remember my mom telling me during that time, you have no idea what your family picture in heaven looks like. She said, somewhere in heaven, Shannan, your family picture is hanging. And you don't know what it looks like. You think you do. You think you know what it looks like, but you don't know. And I think of that all the time. And I think of it with a little bit of fear now because I'm like, can this be the family picture? Like, can we just settle it? And this is the family picture. And I don't know that that's the case yet. I don't know. Because I know that God told us to care for orphans. And I know orphans look very different. They look all different ways. Orphans are sometimes kids without parents who we adopt and bring into our home. Orphans sometimes look like neighbor kids who are parented by a single mom who loves them to the moon and back, but she's working, and for a lot of the time she needs support, and so they come into my home. I know orphans look like one of my best friends who I met a couple of years ago. She's 64. She's not married. She's never had kids. She doesn't have a single family member close to her. She's an orphan. And so she's a part of my family now. And I'm a part of her family now. And so we keep watching we keep watching our family grow in surprising ways, and I don't know the end of it. And I'm finally able to accept that I don't know, and that that's okay. I'm going to read a Bible verse that kind of has been knocking around inside of me for a while. And I meant to say this earlier, we're going to leave a good bit of time for questions at the end. That's always risky, because when I don't have time for questions, then I get swarmed up at the stage. And when I do leave time for questions, everybody gets shy. So this is your warning. You're not allowed to be shy tonight. Think of your questions. Let's chat. For the past couple of months, for maybe the past year, so while I was writing this, I fell in love with the Gospels. I spent most of my year in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I am a girl who grew up in the church from birth. I mean, I had the classic, beautiful childhood. Everything fell into place. Yeah, I had a wonderful, my parents, my life. I mean, everything was just very, very much ideal in many ways. I always knew, I knew of Jesus. I knew of God. I knew I was loved. And it was enough for a long time. And then it started to not be quite enough. Like I needed more. I wanted more. We began searching. We began feeling restless. You know, we were living at the time with our young kids. You know, at the point that we had all three of our little kids, you know, that's when everything started to really happen. So here we are, living in our dream farmhouse. We've got these three precious kids. I mean, if you're going to be blindsided by something, be blindsided by adoption. It's really easy to get on board and be like, well, this is a surprise and it's really awesome. It's pretty hard sometimes, but these kids are adorable, and so we'll take them, you know? Our jobs were good, life was good, church was good. You know, we were doing everything that we were supposed to do. We didn't understand this restlessness that we were feeling. And what we know now is that the thing that we were missing was our life. We were missing our actual life. We were missing the Matthew 10:39, if you cling to your life, you'll lose it. And if you surrender your life for the sake of me, you'll find it. And so at that point that we started to read these Bible verses that, man, I mean, I was in Awana, I was a Bible quizzer. I thought I kind of knew this. I was always confused, like, why do the Gospels repeat themselves? That seems redundant. I'm just being honest. You know, I understood the value and the beauty of God's word, but I did not understand how it was relevant to me. I was missing it because I was letting myself miss it. I was letting myself believe that my faith was about going to church and making my life as safe and secure and comfortable as possible. I really, truly believed that was my job. I truly believed that that was the mark of a good Christian woman, of a good Christian mom. And I don't know that anybody ever explicitly told me that. I don't know that anybody ever explicitly told my husband that. But this is the message that we were infused with. You know, by osmosis, we kind of soaked this stuff in, that risky and dangerous and uncomfortable has no place here. Your job is to make your kids' lives as forward-moving as possible. Your job is to keep climbing the ladder. So I could tell you all the Bible stories from Sunday school. But I struggled to connect it to my personal life. And at the point that I started to read about letting go of your life, surrendering your life, let it go for the sake of Christ, when I started to read about Jesus promising us suffering, he promises it to us as though it is a gift. He's not warning us about it, he's promising it. He's promising that the road was supposed to be hard. He's promising that it was not ever supposed to be about me. So here I am living the American dream with the sight of Jesus. That was my life. And I thought it was good. I thought it was what was asked of me. When what was really asked of me and my family was to push it all off the table. Push it all off the table. You know the story. I don't have to go into all the details, but we brought home a grieving baby. I lost my job a month later. A month after that, my husband lost his job. In the midst of the whole thing, we were reading the Gospels after. Has anybody read the book Radical by David Platt? Read it at your own risk. That was the book that kind of shook us in our shoes from the beginning. But we're reading his book, and we're reading the Gospels, and we're reading all of this kind of chaotic stuff that we hadn't particularly noticed before. We're reading it with fresh eyes, and it's scaring us because it's asking us to do things that we're not ready to do. It's requiring something of us. For the first time, my faith was not there to serve me and what I wanted. That's the way I had always seen it before. So now my faith, if it was going to be real, it was going to cost me something. More than money, even. And money's a hard one. But you get past money, and then it's your very self. I mean, then it's your time, and it's your kids, and it's your comfort, and it's what you like, and it's your dreams, and it's your reputation. It's your power. It's your privilege. It's asking us to lay that on the altar of Jesus' plan to save the world. And that's a scary thing. For me, it was. I can say for sure. There's a verse in the book of Hosea. For the past year, so after I had my whole season in the Gospels, then I've gone into this interesting season in the minor prophets and even the major prophets. I'm like, part of my personality kind of likes conflict, and some personalities like really avoid it. I like bring it on. I want to debate. I want to discuss. I don't want you to agree with me. I like it. And so the prophets have become my good friend this year because, man, they are just like, they're full of fire and they're full of outrage all the time. And it's makes me feel normal, and it makes me feel at home. It makes me feel like they're my brothers. Hosea chapter 13, verses 5 through 6 say, I took care of you in the wilderness in that dry and thirsty land. But when you had eaten and were satisfied, you became proud and forgot me. That is like I could weep just reading that. I read it all the time. It's like going through my mind all the time. He takes care of us. He takes care of us when we're needy. And yet we run from need. He takes care of us when we're outpaced by our life. And that is like very much where I live right now. Constantly outpaced by my life, constantly ill-equipped for my life. And there's part of me that just wants comfort. And then there's part of me that knows that, man, this is so much better. This is the abundant life. I always thought of the abundant life as like the happy life, and it's not. That happiness is not abundance. Do you want to know what abundance is? Abundance is everything. Abundance is you get to taste all of it. Abundance is you get to taste pain and sorrow and suffering because you're really near people who are suffering. You get to taste the redemption. You get to taste hope every day, even when it's hard. That's abundance. That's fulfilling. And when we had eaten and were satisfied, we become proud and forget him. And that is me. It'd be so much better to just think that I could stay near him in just sweeping positive blessing. I don't even know how to use the word blessing anymore because I just think it's all blessing. whether we choose to see it or not. There's another verse in the book of Isaiah, and I don't remember what chapter it's in, and so I'm just going to paraphrase it. But it's a really like verse again. But he says, "Woe to you who warm yourselves by the light of your own fires." I mean, that's the life I lived, and that is the life I still run to. I am always building fires. I'm always building fires and making everything happen and then standing over them and warming myself up. Woe to me when that's the way I choose to operate in my life. I know just a couple of things now. I used to think I knew everything, and part of that is age. And so part of me, I'm parenting a 23-year-old now, and I just keep thinking, well, someday he'll be 30. maybe that'll go better when he's 30. I don't know. Some of growth and maturity just comes with time, right? Right? Please say yes. But when I was in my 20s and when I was even in my 30s, and in many ways still now, I thought I knew so much. I thought I knew the answers. I thought I knew the right way. I thought I knew what being a Christian meant. I thought I knew who I should be spending time with. I thought I knew who God didn't want me spending time with. They were called the bad influences. And I was taught to never be mean to them, but to keep my distance, to keep a safe distance so I would not be corrupted. And so now there are just a couple of things that I know. And talk to me in a few years. They said they're videotaping this tonight. If I don't come back in 5 years and cringe at some of the stuff I say tonight, I will be worried for myself. Because if I'm not growing, if I'm not in a different place with some of this in 5 years from now, then what am I doing? I'm not listening closely enough. But today, I'm 41 years old. It's October 2017. This is what I know. I know that when I have less, when I remember my smallness, when I accept that I'm not in control, I'm closer to God. I know that life was meant to be a bit weird and chaotic. Jesus' life is the picture of this. I mean, that's what, as we're going through and reading Jesus' life, reading the Gospels, I mean, it was crazy. I'd always vaguely known this, but to really read it and to really sit with it and to go back again and again and to saturate myself in it was surprising to me. I mean, he did not care. He did not care what the religious people around him thought. He didn't care. I was just reading 2 days ago, he was baptized by John the Baptist. That was not an accident. So I know so many people in my life, people that I love, people that are my friends, people that I would call my family, who might fit the picture of John the Baptist. And I think for a long time, it's easy to read those stories from the Bible and think John was weird. He wore weird clothes and ate weird things, and isn't that funny? But I mean, picture that person now. Picture that person. People were saying John is psycho. He has lost his mind for real. He probably had some teeth missing. He had mangy hair. He was wearing crazy kind of things, eating crazy kind of stuff. He was not fitting into the mold by far. And that's who Jesus chose to baptize him. What does that tell us? Who did Jesus gravitate to? Who did he choose? Who did he prefer? Who did he spend his time with? And what in the world would we do if they showed up to church on Sunday? What would we do if John the Baptist showed up on Sunday? And not only if he showed up, if he kept coming back, and 6 months from now, he still looked the same. what would we do? Would we be ready for that? Paul tells us to run the race. And to me, I am not a runner. Like, understatement of the year. But I have friends who are. My husband's run a couple of half marathons, and I know that there's a lot involved in running a race. I know that at the end of a race, you're sweaty and you're exhausted. I know it takes a lot of time. And he's telling us to run our race. So I know that for all the times I'm told by various people who love me and care about me that we're just doing too much. You're doing too much, and you need to worry about your own kids. Don't get me started on that. Just don't. We don't have time for that tonight. I understand it, and I understand that this is from a place of love and compassion. But I know that Jesus is my rest. And I know that he is my portion. And I know that he is enough. And I know that he has work for me to do in my neighborhood, in my community, in my school, and in my church. And it does not allow me to continually say, I'm just staying home. I'm just going to worry about my own kids. It's not allowed. It's not okay. If we are running a race, then we need to end up sweaty and exhausted. And it's okay if we are. Cory and I are on a whole other journey right now about understanding Sabbath and why we need it. That is a promise and a gift to us, and it is important, and we are feeling the ways we have neglected it. Sabbath for me and for my family right now cannot happen necessarily on Sunday. And maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we are understanding what it means to let our bodies rest and renew. And what it means, I mean, for goodness sakes, when I talk about running the race, I'm not talking about let's run out and try to solve everybody's problems. If there's one thing I know for sure that I didn't put on this list, but that I should have, it's that I cannot solve anybody's problems. I cannot solve my own. I could give you a long list right now of my problems. And I can't solve my own problems, and I surely to goodness cannot solve anybody else's problems. But I can draw near to them, and they can draw near to me, and we can just like lock elbows through it all and trust that this is discipleship, and this is holy, and this is sanctifying, and this is good work. This is drawing us closer to the character of Christ. We were at Bible study just last Monday night. And so we started a neighborhood, like, I don't even know. I don't want to call it a neighborhood Bible study. We just you know how these things happen. We haphazardly started this Bible study. It's in my neighborhood, and some of my neighbors come, but then some people come from all around. And it's a small group. And we come together and we eat for an hour, kind of like what you guys just did. It's so important to eat together. So important. Keep doing that. We come together and we eat for an hour, and then we study the Bible for an hour. And last week is our first startup week for this school year. And we were going around the circle, chatting and answering a question. And somebody posed a question, what was the most exciting thing that happened to you this summer? And so there's a woman, she was sitting right by my youngest Silas. He just turned 9. And she said, the most exciting thing for me is that one of my best friends got saved. And Silas goes, what happened? And she's like, well, Silas, I'll tell you. And she launches into this long thing, but I'm sitting across the table from him, and I'm having that moment that we have a lot, where I'm like, oh, he doesn't know that word. Does that alarm you? We don't, in my house, like we haven't been super intentional about it, but we don't talk about like getting saved. We don't talk about like saving someone. Like I grew up like we save people. You go to recess and you badger your friends until they pray. You feed them the words to pray, and then they pray them, and then they're saved. And so Silas, I know, he has a very funky, intriguing, magical mind, and who knows what he was picturing, but he was picturing her best friend being saved from some tragedy, which is very much true, but he didn't understand the nuance of it, so he was waiting to hear, like, this exciting story. And so I had to kind of intervene and, like, Silas, you know, what she means is her friend has decided, she has come to understand that she needs God. She needs Jesus. She cannot be good enough on her own. And so she is following hard. She's following Jesus hard. And every day trying to come closer to the heart of Jesus. I think we have to be careful when we coin these terms, these really abstract terms. And I think what has probably taught me that is our friends from jail. I don't know if any of you are involved in any way at the jail or with incarcerated people, but I cannot recommend it highly enough. When you see Jesus at work in the lives of men and women who have no vocabulary for what is happening, it gets very real. They don't know, they haven't been raised like many of us have, and they don't know this idea of like you pray a prayer and then you're saved and everything's fine and you're guaranteed a mansion in heaven someday and just try to do your best. They don't know that. They know a hunger. They know their depravity, like they know it. They know it because everywhere they go, we are showing it to them by the way we treat them and by the way we react to them. They're very aware of their smallness and their lack. They understand what it means to be pursued by God. They understand what it means to be picked up by God over and over and over again. It's just a beautiful thing to be a part of. It changes the way I read the Bible. It changes the way I interact with my kids. The last thing I wrote on my list of things I know is that I know I am loved. Oh no, I wrote two more things. I know that I'm loved. I know that I am loved in a way that I didn't know before. I've always kind of known Jesus loves me. Yes, I know, for the Bible tells me so. I've known that. But I know now that Jesus loves me in that he's willing to sit with me in sadness. And I don't know that there are many things that are more uncomfortable than that, than to sit with somebody in sadness. I'm not good at it. I don't feel like I'm good at it. I don't feel like it's comfortable. It's not what I would prefer. I probably say awkward things, probably do awkward things, probably try to find a reason why it's not going to work for me to go and sit with you in your sadness. And Jesus is like sweeping the path clear and saying, go. And so when Jesus can sit with me in my sadness, I get to go and sit with other people in their sadness. The way Jesus loves and rescues me, I get to tell of the way he loves and rescues you. I know life was never meant to be comfortable or simple or safe. I wish I had better news. I really wish I did. I keep hesitating to go into this, and I'm just going to go into it a little bit, because then I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. But over the past 48 hours, 3 people who I love, 3 people, two of them I wrote about in this book, have all been arrested in 48 hours. Like it just never ends. And some of them were arrested because they needed to be arrested, and some of them were arrested because the system is profoundly unfair in many ways. And so we get to sit in some sadness for the next little while, and we get to sit in some frustration. I mean, I I've been ignoring phone calls all day, automated. You have a collect phone call from so-and-so. One particular person who's begging us to bail her out of jail, and we just don't do that. My husband's a chaplain. We don't have the money anyway. We're not bailing anybody out of jail. It's just like one of our hard and fast rules is not going to happen. And this person will not let it go. And I'm just thinking, can you imagine, like for the first time ever today, I had this, just a few hours ago, it hit me like jail has been a part of my life for years now. It's a part of my daily conversation to a fault sometimes. We have a lot of conversation about jail, but I've never stopped to think about booking. I've never been in booking at the jail. Cory is there all the time. But when you're first arrested, you go to booking. And sometimes you stay there. Like one of our friends will be there the whole time and hopefully might get out tomorrow. I don't know. But all of a sudden I realized, is there a more depressing place to be? What about the people that are working and booking? Because they're surrounded by people who, some of them are detoxing off of drugs, probably many of them. And every single one of them is desperate to get out. Whether they earned the right to be there or not, they're desperate to get out, and they're picking up the phone every 15 minutes and begging anybody they know to bail them out of jail. People are ignoring their phone calls or telling them no. And they're at their lowest. Jail is rough. But I think today it dawned on me, booking might be a whole different level of low. Because you haven't come to terms with anything, and there you are. You're just, that's when a lot of people realize maybe they didn't have quite the friends they thought they did. All of this stuff starts coming out, and it all happens in booking. And I just thought, I think I know where Jesus would go right now. I think he would probably go hang out in booking. Not just at the jail, but in booking at the jail. So after the newness of this part of my life wore off, a year and a half or so ago, I was faced with the question, now what? We knew when we moved into our neighborhood that we weren't coming with an agenda. We weren't coming to plant a church. We weren't coming to start a Bible study. That ended up happening down the road, but we didn't show up with that intention. We didn't show up to start a food pantry. We understood that our neighborhood was very low income, but we had it was almost weird, almost, to just show up and be like, oh, now we just live here. What does this mean? Well, what it means is we send our kids to Chamberlain Elementary, and we walk to school, and we get involved in the neighborhood association, and we became members at St. Mark's United Methodist Church. We visited one time, just we should probably do that. Since they're right here, we should stop in and say hello. We'd never been Methodist before. We showed up once, and we've never shown up anywhere else. So we understood that we were there to be a neighbor. And we understood on some level that being a neighbor was going to be a layered kind of thing. We understood abstractly that being a neighbor, that was going to continue. There would be growth there over time. You don't just show up and neighbor and cross it off your list. Neighbor and neighboring is a really ongoing thing, and it's the core of our life. It's the core of everything we do, is how can we love our neighbor? How can we be loved by our neighbor? How can we show hospitality to our neighbor? But man, how can we receive hospitality from our neighbor? That gets really interesting. We've been given the weirdest gifts. I just turned in my draft of my next book, and I write a chapter about some of the gifts we've received from our neighbors, and it's kind of like the stories we've all heard about the old country doctor that would be paid with a bag of carrots or a goat or whatever. That's how it feels sometimes. Today I was at a neighbor's house, and with my youngest, Silas, he's like a technology freak, anything with buttons and cords and chargers, and So we're in our neighbor's house, and Bobby comes around the corner and hands Silas like a knockoff Apple Watch. Is that what they're called? Just hands it to him. I'm like, wait a minute. Can we talk about this? It's causing all kinds of chaos back at my house. Or my 12-year-old and my 10-year-old came home, or 12 and 11 came home this afternoon, and Silas opens with, Calvin, I don't want to brag, but look what Bobby gave me. And so everybody's upset at home. And he can't really, I don't know. We get paid in weird ways. People find excuses to love us. And I've never felt so loved. It's paramount to receive hospitality, to not always be the one giving hospitality. So as we're neighboring, and as things get more and more normal, the now what question has been answered with 2 words. You'll never guess what they are. Every time I'm saying to God, now what? Like there for a while, I was like, well, this was fun. Now where do you want us to go? Like, what am I going to keep writing about? Like, this is all just completely normal, not scary at all, and pretty, in a lot of ways, underwhelming, and we like it and all, but like, surely you don't want us to be this comfortable. Surely we should move somewhere else. We should move. I tried to talk Cory for a minute when Robert was in prison at Michigan City. I was like, look at all these houses. Maybe we should move to Michigan City. They probably need a chaplain. Cory was like, well, there's probably plenty of houses for sale in Michigan City, and we technically could, but no. Every time I asked God that question, now what? He said back to me, pay attention. I closed my book, I think. I wrote the Epilogue of Falling Free. That's what I wrote last. And I wrote it kind of last minute kind of thing, and that's just as I was going into this pay attention season. So I did all the going, not all the going. I'm sure there's more going somewhere. I'm sure of it. But I did the going. We go where we're sent, right? And until we hear differently, we stay. What does it look like to stay well? What does it look like to be a stayer? I have learned a ton about what it looks like to be a stayer at my church. That has gone through all kinds of drama and fracture and conflict and depression and on it goes. When I wrote this book, things were in the honeymoon phase, and then that was over and things got really hard there. And we were always like, what are we supposed to do? You start to really wrestle with what is it that matters about church? Like, what matters? I always tell my kids they can pick 2 foods that they don't like. They can only pick 2. You can't not like every vegetable. You can have 2 things. You get 2. So when we were wrestling with all this church stuff, we decided that we could pick 2 things that mattered, only 2. And we found both of them where we were, and so we stayed. And we stayed when it was so hard. And we stayed when nobody else stayed. And we stayed when we had 1 foot out the door. And then the weirdest thing happened. And there's just a really strange and amazing thing happening over at St. Mark's United Methodist right now. We do not have a pastor. We haven't had a pastor since June. We have no paid staff other than Rich, who leads us in worship out of our hymnal. And we became flooded with people from the Work Release Center. And if I could script it, I don't think I could have scripted it better. I don't think I would have chosen differently this time. Like what God gave and what my heart wanted ended up being the same thing. And so you want to see some weird church, just come and visit. Sometime just come and say hi, anytime. Because we are a church 2/3 filled now with John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is serving communion to me. Christ's body broken for you, Shannan. I dare you not to weep if you ever experience that. If you experience somebody head to toe in tattoos, and they're telling you this is the body of Christ broken for you. Every step of the way is a journey from what I thought I knew, what I thought was best. It's a journey of endurance. It's a journey of complication. It's a journey of being misunderstood a lot. It's a journey where our faith must cost us something. We hope, no matter where we live, no matter where you live, no matter where you are, no matter where you work, we get to be a safe place for people whose lives are at their absolute worst moment, for people who are in booking. Find the people around you sitting in booking and swing open your door. Bring them into your home. Tell them to leave their shoes on because you are not worried about your floors. And set a place for them at your table. And they will break your heart. They'll make you so sad. They'll make you so frustrated. They'll make you so grateful for the presence of Jesus, who never leaves you, who's sitting beside you in that sadness, who is pointing you to hope, promising you that it's worth it. My journey to paying attention began with a really small act. And it's so special. Like, I keep reminding myself, like, you're in Goshen. Like, these people know. They know this place. It began with me beginning this, and I have to, like, tattle on myself a little bit again. It began with the decision a year into our life on 5th Street. It began with the decision to begin walking my kids to school. Now, if you know, some of you know where I live. It's very embarrassing that it took me a year to realize that I could walk my kids 2.5 blocks to school instead of driving them every morning, which is what I did for the first year. All I can say is I am a country girl. I came from a place where we had to drive everywhere. And so it's just what we did. We like hopped into the car or into the van every morning, like scattered and crazy, and drove to school, and that was that. It was never a very beautiful thing. And at a certain point in time, Jesus began pointing my attention to, like, so Shannan, you say you want to get to know your neighbors better, right? You say you want to connect with them more. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Because look out your window. They're all walking. They're walking in the snow. They're walking in the rain. Many of my neighbors don't drive for many different reasons. They're walking. So why don't you do that? And so we did, and we became very intentional about it, and we're going on our 3rd year now. And so we walk 2.5 blocks there, and then I walk 2.5 blocks home. And I think initially, like, I'm always trying to, like, drum up business. Like, there's that good Christian girl part of me that's like, oh, so okay, God, I'll start walking the kids to school, and then I'll meet all these new friends, and then they'll come over for tea, and it's just going to be amazing. Well, that didn't happen. But what happened was, day after day after day, I would see the same people. We would wave, we would say hi. Day after day after day, I would walk by the same houses, and I would start to notice, is somebody living in that rental? Is something happening in there? There's different stuff on the porch. I started to notice what was growing up from the ground. I started to notice the way the trees were shifting along the seasons. I started paying attention. I started to do the thing God asked me to do. I started taking a picture most days. So on my walk back to school, like, find something beautiful. It's the same path. Every now and then I venture slightly out, but normally it's the same path. Find a picture and call it beautiful. See it as beautiful and find it beautiful. And I'm telling you, I began to love, the neighborhood that I already loved as much as I could. Like, I just began to really fall in love with it. I began to own it. I began to take ownership of it. I began to be owned by it. Like this became my place now, and I love my place. And if I love my place, then I really love its people too. And all I can tell you is that it mattered. It shifted things. I started going back to the Gospels and looking at the way, looking again, taking another look, because it's true. It's true what I was always told. Like, it never gets old. It never runs out. It never runs dry. And I never really believed it, and now I do. So now I can go back into, John, and I can take my pencil, and I started underlining, how did Jesus interact with his world? Well, if you take a close look, what you'll find is Jesus was walking, and he saw this. And Jesus was walking along, and he heard this. And Jesus was walking along, and he felt somebody pull at his tunic. He was paying attention. He's God. I get it. It's not quite completely the same. But this is to show us how to be. This is to show us how to neighbor. And he was paying attention. He was looking around. He was listening. He was tasting. He was talking to us about simple things. He was walking through life with the people that he saw along the way. What if we all just did that? What if we became committed to paying attention to our place and trusting and believing that this is our place for a reason? This is not where we just landed. This is not where we are by accident. This is not where we are because of our husband's job or because of our job or because we still have kids in school. All those things might be true, but where we are planted is with great purpose and intention. And we're planted there because Jesus wants us to be part of his plan to pull his kingdom down to the earth where we're standing. We get to be a part of that. And it's crazy that he lets us be a part of that, quite honestly. It's nuts. It is crazy that he sent 2 introverts to live in a neighborhood with plenty of needs where people knock on my door a lot. Like, I feel like God put that on the wrong, accidentally. It was supposed to go to an extrovert and it didn't. It came to us. That's crazy because we get it wrong. We chase the wrong things. We choose the wrong things. And Jesus still says that he wants us to be a part of this. And it's so cool. It's so cool to come to a place where we can sit around a table on Sunday afternoons. Sunday afternoons at my house now, people from work release have an open invitation to come and eat lunch with us in our home. And so the crowd is always different. Some of them are always the same. Some of them are always different. But we get to sit across the table with them and just talk about life and talk about Jesus sometimes, but just talk about work. Talk about life. Talk about their kids. Look them in the eye. And see ourselves reflected in their faces. That is not something I knew to ever ask for. I didn't know that I wanted that. I didn't know that I wanted my kids to have that. But we pay attention. You guys, I'm gonna close with this last story, and we have just a little bit of time for questions. I love that you guys have read the book. Okay, you might remember the story I told about the lady that I heard, her child needed to use the bathroom out my living room windows. And so I was this is early on when I was still I was paying attention, but I was also I'm desperate to meet people. And so I invited her in and I asked her when her baby was due. Never. If you have one takeaway from the book, never do that. As she's holding an infant in her arms, it was so embarrassing. I had to write it. If I kept that a secret, I was being dishonest as a person. I had to put it in print. Well, lo and behold, who was at church on Sunday? Heather. And what did she say to me on Sunday? Because here's something I didn't expect. It never crossed my mind that this book would be very widely read in the jail. Never crossed my mind. Anybody that I specifically wrote about, with one exception, they knew, and they gave their approval on what I said. Robert read every word I wrote about him. There was one couple that they had disappeared, and now they're like some of my best friends, and it's Mike and Lori is what I call them in the book, and Mike was like, nobody in here believes me that I'm Mike, because you called me Mike. Why did you give me a different name? Nobody believes me, as he's in jail. So this book is making its rounds in jail because all these guys are super intrigued to get the inside scoop on Cory, their chaplain. It's so funny. I went and did a book club in maximum security. It's crazy. It's crazy. So over time, over the past 2 years, Heather and her husband both read the book and obviously knew that this was about them. And so she comes up to me at my church on Sunday. She had been there the week before. And so, we had said hi. She shows up last Sunday, and she's holding this toddler. She's like, Shannan, this is him. And I knew right away what she was talking about, but I was so embarrassed. I'm like, oh, he's grown. He's so big. The elephant in the room, like, yeah, he's the one that I said, when are you due, as you were holding him. What is wrong? What is wrong with me? So in closing, that's what I want to leave you with, is the idea that if you're feeling a little restless, you might not quite have your life. You might not. You might just still be holding on to it enough that you don't quite have the life that the Lord is writing for you. And if you find yourself in that position, you find yourself I found myself kind of desperate for the chaos of the gospel once I started to notice it. If you find yourself feeling like that, start paying attention. You don't have to move. You don't have to quit your job and become a chaplain. You don't have to send your kids to a different school. You don't have to adopt. But you will find yourself pulled to these hidden corners that operate around us. Go spend time in the laundromat, for real. Take your laundry to the laundromat and just see who you meet. Get a part-time job at a fast food restaurant. Go to a different grocery store and get to know the produce guy. Pay attention. I'm going to close with a quick prayer, and then we have like 3 minutes for questions, so you can be shy if you want to. God, I thank you so much for bringing me here tonight. Thank you so much for this room full of men and women who want more of you. There is nothing more beautiful. There is nothing more beautiful to you than when we know we are needy. We know that we're not doing it quite right. We know that we are serving ourselves in ways that don't really honor you and honor your life and honor your death. God, just pull us in. You are so compelling. Your story is so relevant to us. We know the story of the miracles you've done. We know that you fed crowds, but we also know that you fed the crowds by saying, how much bread do you have? And God, we have bread. So I just ask that you would be our courage in helping us unclench those fists and open our hands and surrender what we have back to you for the sake of your kingdom, for the sake of your glory. You're the only way we're getting through this mess. You're the only way that we're going to find this mess beautiful, and we need you. We need to lose our reputation in a whole lot of ways. We need the world around us to see people who follow hard after Jesus in ways that cost them something. This is not an easy faith, and you have promised us that, but it is fulfilling. It is abundant, and we are so thankful. God, just move us in ways that only you can. Open our eyes, open our hearts, that we can hear you at work, that we can see you at work, where you're already at work, that we are not the ones bringing you to these hard places, but you are already there and you're inviting us to join you there. Give us the guts to do that. In your name we pray. Amen. I think there's a couple of microphones if anybody has a question or two.
Shannan,
I know, that's how I felt.
you and Cory had to navigate a lot of change and risk in your life together. What's that like? Are you both at the same place, the same point in time?
That's a great question. It's a question I get a lot, and yes, we were. And that's never the answer people really want to hear. We were it very much happened for us very simultaneously. And I know that that's not the way it usually goes. I know the way it's not how it often goes. My husband and I, we went through like crisis early in our marriage. Our marriage almost did not survive. Like right before we moved to DC, like early in our marriage. And what I know is that we had been healed and restored in many ways from that time, but like coming into mission, like this new mission, and by mission I just mean like willing to serve Christ for real, was the most unifying thing I can imagine. It gave a really special purpose to our marriage, and it brought us closer. But yeah, God kind of whacked us over the head at the same time. And then he just made it just so clear, that we couldn't really deny it. But it was a lot. It was a lot of change. We always, sometimes he struggled more and some days I struggled more. And so luckily we didn't really have major doubts on the same day kind of thing. Like we just kept pushing forward. And yeah, it's interesting now. Parenting Robert has been a challenge, especially when he lived with us. Like we didn't see, Cory and I didn't, it's not like, and then after that point, everything was bliss and we agreed on everything. You've always got that tension and we've got strong personalities and so we just get to keep wrestling through that change as it comes, and it's stretching in a lot of ways. But yeah, the initial stuff, we were pretty together on that.
When you guys decided to go on this journey, how did you know that the Holy Spirit was nudging you? Mm-hmm. And then secondly, how did you know to continue to follow the prompting?
Say that last part again.
How did you know to continue following the prompting of the Holy Spirit?
Yeah. I knew that it was the Holy Spirit speaking to me because I cried for days. And in my life before, I was not a big crier, and I was just weeping all over the place. I felt very sick to my stomach. I was like, I was feeling butterflies. I think there's a limit to this. I don't think this is like a blanket, this isn't a Band-Aid that works for every situation, but I knew that it was the Holy Spirit because it was not what I would have chosen. It was the opposite of what I would have chosen. And so in a lot of ways, I still kind of use that as my gauge. And that's why I'm surprised sometimes when what I want and what God wants for me happen to align. It doesn't happen that way a lot. But so it was not what I wanted, and it very much lined up with what I was reading. To the extreme, like glaring. I felt like, have I never read this before? Like I was just seeing it in such a different way because I was seeing it in a way that was going to change my life. I was forced to pay attention to that. And I think, why do we continue on? We're just obsessed with our life now. I can't imagine. There are times that I will say, like, I miss the comfort a little bit. Cory and I look at each other a lot of times now and say, what did we used to talk about? Because we have to shut it down sometimes. Like, we have to be like, we cannot keep talking about jail stuff all the time. Like, we need to talk about our kids. You know what I mean? Like, it's like everything kind of flips. There are days that we just feel like, what in the world did we do with all of our time? I really don't know. I mean, other than the fact that we were parenting tiny people and we were living a full life, but it's hard and it's a struggle. But man, our faith has never been more real. And that's something that I don't ever want to miss. I don't ever want to eat so much that I'm satisfied and I forget God. I forget my need for him. And so it's just compelling. I mean, it's such a gift to sit near people who have lived differently than I have, and to begin to identify with them. It's just something that is, for us, the more we have, the more we want. And so that makes it a pretty natural. I grew up in a tiny public school. I had 42 or 43 in my graduating class. Very, very middle-class, white Christian. And that's where some of my, like, oh man, this is kind of scary. It's going to be different. People are different. Like, I had some natural fear of people if they just looked different than me, because I had never been exposed to that. And I'm so grateful that my kids are growing up with that they get to not be afraid of people who don't look like them. That's pretty amazing. So yeah, I think it kind of feeds itself for us. We maybe have time for one more, if anybody else has one.
I have a question. Reading your book, some of it was confusing, it was hard to stay on track, but listening to you speak.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, the timeline gets hard to follow in the book. Me and my editor were painfully aware of that. It's not written as a memoir, so it's not linear. So I'm sorry for when it's confusing. You're welcome. Thank you, guys.